I just want to say hello to everybody. My name is Betty Brown, and welcome to the American Holistic Nurses Association of Central Ohio, or AHNACO, our monthly presentation series. And tonight's presentation topic is occupational therapy outdoors, connecting, growing, and thriving in nature with Lindsey Stmper, owner of Forestways Occupational Therapy. Um, if you would be so kind to share maybe in the chat box where you're from, because I think several of us are from different locations, maybe not even Columbus, Ohio, and your professional background. And during the presentation, I'll monitor the chat. So if you have any questions, you can write your questions down there. And then we will have time at the end for questions and answers. So if you don't get a chance to, write your questions down, don't worry. So, but before we get started, I want to share with you a little bit about AHNACO and our founding organization, American Holistic Nurses Association, or AHNA. AHNA is a specialty nursing association serving over 5,500 nurses and holistic healthcare professionals in the United States and internationally. AHNA's mission is to illuminate holism in nursing practice, community advocacy, research, and education with the vision that every nurse is a holistic nurse. AHNACO is the Central Ohio chapter of AHNA, and we would love to invite nurses and other allied healthcare providers to become a member of AHNA and AHNACO. And just some of the benefits of being an AHNACO member, I just want to highlight, is the community support and networking, promote holistic practices locally, nationally, globally. We offer educational opportunities, including continuing education credits, connect with interdisciplinary community, and join others who value diversity, and to have access to all of our recorded presentations from the past and the present and future. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you can send an email to ahnacolumbus at Gmail, AHNACOLUMBUS at gmail.com. So now I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Lindsey Stmper, owner of Forestways Occupational Therapy. Lindsey loves helping children reach their potential with compassionate care and family collaboration. She is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she received her master's degree from San Jose State University. Lindsey has over 20 years of experience as an occupational therapist in pediatric settings and established her outdoor practice, Forestways OT, in Columbus, Ohio in 2021. She is a mom of 2 boys and has seen the benefits of sensory-rich outdoor play for her own children and those she works with. Lindsey has training in the Cantigo approach to nature-based therapy, Powerfully You self-regulation program, therapeutic listening, handwriting without tears, reflex integration, yoga and mindfulness for children, assistive technology, and numerous sensory techniques. She is a certified provider of timber nook nature play experiences and an experienced yoga instructor. Additionally, Lindsey has presented for numerous schools, parent groups, and Ohio Occupational Therapy Association and the American Therapy Association. And in this presentation, Lindsey will discuss the benefits of utilizing nature connection in occupational therapy and related healthcare practices with a primary focus on pediatric populations. Considerations for taking these practices outdoors, as well as a variety of resources, will be provided. So I'd like to go ahead and offer Lindsey to um, proceed with her presentation.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up my screen share here and make sure that all of you can see it. We'll put it in slideshow view. Can someone just give me a thumbs up to make sure everybody's seeing the slideshow now? Okay, good. So thank you, Betty, for that introduction. It's good to be here with all of you. It looks like many of you are nursing background and one OT that's joined us tonight, so that's great. And as Betty mentioned, obviously I'll be talking from an occupational therapy perspective, but I do feel like there's so much that overlaps with especially holistic nursing, nursing in general, but especially holistic nursing. So, a little bit about occupational therapy for those who might come from a different background. Let me just minimize my view of all of you because I can't see my whole presentation. There we go. Um, so, occupational therapy supports individuals in their occupations or any activity that is meaningful and valuable to them. We talk about as OTs that we help individuals develop skills for the job of living across the lifespan. Most of my experience has been in pediatrics from birth all the way up through age 21. However, my very first job was actually with Ohio Health, and I noticed somebody put in the chat that you do some work with Ohio Health. And I worked in a subacute rehab setting initially, and then moved across the country, moved to multiple different places with my husband, and had the opportunity to work in lots of different settings. And then, as Betty mentioned, I started my practice here in the Columbus area almost 3 years ago. So OT is definitely, provided for individuals across the lifespan from birth all the way through. Even some OTs work in end of life care. It's both an art and a science. And we take many courses that probably overlap a bit with nursing students. I know I had like pharmacology and some other courses like that that were alongside with some nursing students when I was at the University of Wisconsin. For children, OT can include occupations in areas of play, leisure, social interaction, education, rest and sleep, and activities of daily living. Of course, for adults, you might also include work participation in that list, as well as what we call instrumental activities of daily living. So things like shopping, taking care of home management type tasks. OT is traditionally provided in homes, schools, clinics, and hospitals. I've worked in all of those settings before, and most recently was in Columbus City Schools for a brief period of time before opening my practice in 2021. So there are definitely some similarities with holistic nursing, and I just kind of pulled from the website, the holistic nursing website, to provide this information on this screen. But holistic nursing is defined as all nursing practice that has healing the whole person as its goal. And from Florence Nightingale, the quote here is that she taught that nurses focus on the principles of holism, unity, wellness, and the interrelationship of human beings and their environment. I can definitely relate to this as an occupational therapist. One of the theories in the OT world that we talk a lot about is the person, occupation, and environment fit. And this sounds very similar to that, and that we can have our most impact in those areas where those three things overlap. So those meaningful activities, the individual factors of the person, their strengths and challenges, and then the environment. So obviously, in an outdoor practice, the environment is not just, the home setting or the school setting or the community, but also the natural environment becomes a huge part of what I utilize. I don't want to say use, but I collaborate with. We try not to phrase it as using the environment and try to be more environmentally conscious as collaborating with what the environment provides. So you've heard a little bit about my journey so far from Betty and from what I've said. So in the last 2.5 years, or a little bit more than that now, I began providing outdoor therapy services in the Columbus area. I utilize public parks for providing those services and have worked to secure permits to be able to use public spaces. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on and the importance of doing that. But in these photos here, you see some individual services with individual clients, as well as that top photo is me leading a small group. And you'll notice too that there are different seasonal pictures here. I think I've got one from almost every season on this slide. And I provide outdoor occupational therapy services year round. So before the presentation started, Betty was asking me a little bit about that and if I was outside today on a rainy day in Columbus. And in fact, I was seeing clients outside today. So I provide those outdoor services year round. And if we have an extreme weather day, temperatures that are, 20 to 25 degrees or below, or any kind of severe weather, thunder, lightning, that kind of thing, I have some agreements with some local churches where I can utilize space indoors on an as needed basis. And so we'll shift indoors or in, certain circumstances, I might meet a child at their home instead. So those are some photos there of those groups. And then this page also has some individual clients as well as a camp photo there on the left. In the summertime, I provide camps for up to 12 children at a time. They are half day, 4-day a week camps at High Banks Metro Park here in the Columbus area. So I'm gearing up for that. We have our first one next week, and I have some occupational therapy assistant students from a local technical college that are helping me with providing those services. So moving into a little bit about the why behind doing occupational therapy outdoors. So a few years ago, when I was working in the schools, I came across a couple of different resources that really inspired me to make this change to working outside. And those books are listed in the references at the end, but just to give you a little preview, one of them is called Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, and another one is called Balanced and Barefoot by Angela Hanscom. And both of those books talk about the disconnect of children from the natural environment and really got my wheels kind of spinning about it. So on this slide, I've just given a few points about the importance of human connection to nature, obviously for all humans, not just children. So the first one being that only recently have humans lived very disconnected from the natural world. So when we think about the evolution of human history, really, it's only been in the last, I would argue, even 50 years that we've been as disconnected from nature as we are now. E.O. Wilson in 1984 developed the biophilia hypothesis, stating that we have an innate need to connect to other living things, especially in nature. Some of the other theories underpinning this human connection to nature are attention restoration theory that the Kaplans developed. And they found that daily life exhausts our directed attention, but restorative environments in or even just looking at nature can improve mental fatigue and concentration. So they talked about in natural environments, we have what's called soft fascination. So our brains kind of get to move into this rest and reset state. Whereas directed attention, when you think of doing, for children, doing schoolwork, academic learning, those things are very direct attention focused. And then when we shift into the natural world, we're allowed to drop into the state of soft fascination, where we might see something interesting, a butterfly, a bird, but we're not asked to, solve mental math problems right then. Our brain is able to rest and relax in those environments, and it just encourages that different brain state. And then finally, stress reduction theory is listed down at the bottom. Ulrich did some really interesting studies looking at recovery time of individuals who are hospitalized and found that natural environments and even viewing nature, so these were people who were still in hospitals, but those who had rooms with an outdoor view or even looking at nature within their room, on a screen or on, photos actually reduce their experience of stress. So really interesting, and I think important for any of us who work in healthcare to consider that. I was really struck by just a few months ago, my mother-in-law was hospitalized and her bed faced the interior of the hospital, looking at the hallway and the nurses' station. And even though there was a window in the room, she couldn't see it from the bed and it faced a brick wall. So similar, environments in Ulrich's study would have shown that those people would have had a much longer recovery period. So talking a little bit about children specifically and nature today. These, facts that I've listed here are from a variety of resources that are in the references, but overall, what we're finding is that children are spending much less time in nature now than they did even a generation or two ago. So if you think back on maybe your own childhood and how you grew up, I know I grew up in a suburb of Columbus, as Columbus was developing rapidly at the time. But I had a lot of outdoor time. There was a wooded area that was adjacent to my neighborhood. We would go out there and play, often without adult supervision. My parents knew where we were, but we were, nearby playing out in these woods. Many kids now do not have any kind of an experience like that of having, unstructured outdoor playtime. There's decreased outdoor time during school. Again, I think many of us could look back on our own childhoods and remember lots of quality recess time. And I will say that having recently, as recent as 4 years ago, been in public schools, many kids are getting, even at elementary ages, maybe 20 or 30 minutes of outdoor time a day at school. And Angela Hanscom, the author of the book Balanced and Barefoot that I mentioned earlier, and she's the developer of the Timbernook program that was mentioned in my bio and nature play experience. She says that kids need 45 minutes before they even are able to come up with a plan for what they're going to do during unstructured time. So when you think about the shortened time available in school settings for that outdoor play, kids are not even hitting that 45-minute mark. There's an increased use of screens. Obviously, technology has become, for better or worse, a big part of our lives now. And many children are spending a lot of time on screens. An increased participation in structured activities for children. So many kids are, their parents might think we need to get them outside. I'm going to sign them up for soccer practice, which you see on the photo here. Nothing wrong with participating in group games and soccer, but what we're finding is that kids are very overscheduled often and in multiple structured activities that don't allow for that unstructured time, that time to develop play schemes, to engage in healthy, risky play behavior, to be able to navigate social conflicts that come up because adults are directing all of the activity. Increased rates of obesity in children, as much as 20 to 30% of kids are now identified as being overweight. Reduce natural play space accessibility. So I mentioned before the woods near my home. Many of you probably have fond memories of something similar, a play space that you might have engaged in play. Perceived or real lack of safety. So for a lot of urban children especially, and I, can relate to this from having worked with kids in Columbus City schools, that oftentimes there is a real lack of safety in their immediate environments, and parents don't feel comfortable with letting their kids play outside. And then perceived being that many parents today, because of, our never-ending constant updates of news and that kind of thing, have this perceived feeling that it's not safe for children to be playing outdoors. And then just an interesting fact that's at the bottom there, there was a study that Balmford did. This was done in the UK back in 2002. And I would say if it was done today, you would find this was even more true. But children in that study were able to identify imaginary characters from Pokemon with greater ability than natural items from their own surrounding community. So, unable to identify different types of leaves, or, I've had kids that I've worked with who who had no idea what a pine cone was when I showed it to them. So it just really interesting and really highlights that difference and that divide between, our exposure to nature in the past, or as our human ancestors would have had that direct connection to nature, and how children are experiencing the natural world today. So Richard Louv, the author of The Last Child in the Woods, coined this term nature deficit disorder to really kind of encompass what I just mentioned on that last slide, that there is a human cost to this alienation from nature, and it includes diminished senses, decreased attention, and increased physical and mental illness that's seen by this disconnect. So kind of shifting here into a little bit of the benefits of being outdoors and the reasons why I have taken my practice outdoors. So one of the main benefits as an OT is the opportunities for sensory motor development. Nature provides the ultimate sensory experience, and I love the seasonal aspect of the work that I do now. As you can see here, there's a picture of a child I was working with outdoors in the snow. We were doing some snow painting, so there's water with a little bit of food coloring in it, and he's using a paintbrush to decorate the snow. We also rolled snowballs in order to get that great heavy work proprioceptive sensory input that us OTs love. And so he, was engaging in all of that play. We were working on fine motor grasp and lots of different things that day. And then the other child there, that was actually a wintertime picture, but not obviously nearly as cold. I don't even have gloves on in the picture. It was a warm winter day. But yeah, I don't have to create sensory bins like an OT and an indoor clinic or a school might do, where, maybe there's a big plastic bin that's filled with water beads, or they might bring in leaves or some of those things. And those have their time and place, but I love that now I have creeks to be able to utilize and mud that we can play in, and all of these natural experiences that involve textures and temperatures. We also do a lot of swinging. So you see that picture with the boy there, and with the leaf background is sitting in a hammock, but I use hammocks a lot for swinging, and I'm able to, hang them in different ways from trees and provide lots of great sensory input that would typically be done similarly in an indoor clinic or school setting with swings. So the natural environment outdoors is both calming and alerting at the same time, which is really unique. When you think about the colors outdoors, we have, greens and blues and colors that are much more calming to our visual system, with those bright colors, the bright reds and yellows and those kind of things in much smaller amounts in flowers and birds. And so even that visual input of the environment creates that calm setting. What's also really neat about it, and the alerting part that I love, is when something kind of out of the blue happens when we're outside. So the other day, there was a goose that was honking as it flew up above us. And then all of a sudden, we have a natural opportunity for a child to orient to that auditory input. I love doing that when the creek is really rushing too. And can you notice the different sounds in the environment? Those things in an indoor setting all have to be very manufactured. So I love, just those natural opportunities that the outdoor environment provides. So continuing with some more sensory motor development benefits here, nature promotes physical health in children. So increased strength and endurance and reduced obesity when children are spending more time out in nature. There's lots of opportunities for gross and fine motor skill development outdoors. I use a lot of natural materials for fine motor things. So like I have a pine cone here that had been laced with some string on it. A lot of times I'll do activities where we might be digging in the dirt and using our muscles that way to, dig out a rock or something that's of interest to them. As far as gross motor play too, the opportunities outdoors when you have natural materials, rocks that are uneven and not the same shape every time, a child steps on them, or logs to balance on as opposed to a straight, flat balance beam. All of those things are like cross training for that gross motor development. So children are getting opportunities to engage in those motor play activities in a way that they wouldn't otherwise get indoors. So, for example, in an indoor clinic, you might have stepping stones that are plastic and they're pretty much the same. Or they might be different sizes, but they're, very similar shape, or a flat balance beam. Whereas outdoors, I have to actually be careful with the children that we make sure we've tested logs and they're not going to roll, and all of those kinds of skills that you just don't have to work on in an indoor setting because the environment is much different. So the outdoors fosters more active play than traditional playgrounds. There's been some studies showing that children compared on motor skills assessed by kids who had spent more time on playgrounds versus a natural setting where they might have inclines and declines to navigate on ridges, or logs to climb over. Those children with the more natural setting have stronger gross motor skills than even playgrounds, which, obviously every time a child approaches it, it's set up the exact same way if they're going to the same playground. Um, Participation in nature also supports immune system development. So just that opportunity to be around the dirt, the smells, the environment of nature really provides a lot of health benefits. And then also being outdoors improves eye health. So when I mentioned, the geese flying overhead, or looking across, the park to find a bird that's somewhere, that is that far gaze that many of us don't spend a lot of time doing during our days, because a lot of our world is right in front of us and very close. And so it gives an opportunity for those eyes to shift into that extended far gaze and improves eye health. There's actually been in recent years a big increase in myopia in children. And a lot of that is thought to be due to the fact that kids are spending less time outdoors and more time on close devices and doing play that's in their near field of vision instead of gazing much further. Nature's benefits for social emotional development. So being outdoors can improve our mood and energy. You probably just know that intuitively if you are an outdoor lover. There's also opportunities for increased confidence and competence. There's a lot of research that's been coming out recently about the benefits of risky play, and having children kind of assess risk, being able to work together with peers, figure out what's safe, what's not safe, and how that helps build resilience in children. Resilience, I find also happens in my practice just because of the year-round outdoor environment. And so, kids are spending time outdoors even when it's cold, even when it's really hot out. And so that natural environment helps me and the children build up our resilience. Increased motivation and engagement. There's always something novel outdoors, and I can't always predict exactly what that's going to be as a therapist, which is both challenging and really fun. So, we never know what the weather is going to provide for us. We might have more mud one day than another day. We might have certain animals that we see that we don't see on other days. So there's always something unique and novel. And then the seasons too provide us with lots of different opportunities to engage in different play. In the fall, I do a lot of leaf-based activities. We might cut on leaves or write on leaves, hole punch leaves. We do all kinds of different things, create different crafts. And then same in the spring, we've been doing some things with dandelions and with different things that we find at this time of the year. Being outdoors reduces stress. There's lots of studies on adults that have shown the benefits of time outdoors for stress reduction, decreases in cortisol levels, improvements in those natural killer cells that help our immune system function, and then cooperative and social play. One of the great things about being outside is that because we don't have the boundaries of walls like I might have had in an indoor setting with kids. When I have a group of kids, we can play group games that involve running and climbing, and lots of opportunities for the children to build things together and really utilize a lot of space. Cognitive development. So nature helps support self-regulation with that calm, alert environment. Attention, as I mentioned earlier with the attention restoration theory. Memory and cognitive flexibility can be supported outdoors, and imaginative play. So I use a lot of loose parts in both my enrichment camps as well as my therapy services. Those could be anything from a stick to a big log to build with. We might find stones or bigger rocks to build. Just yesterday, I had a child who wanted to build a little waterfall off of the side of the creek. And so we were hauling these big rocks over, and he was problem solving, trying to figure out how to set them up to make it flow just the way he wanted to. So lots of neat imaginative play that we can do with the loose parts that are found in nature. And then nature and spiritual development. Being outdoors can help give us this sense of peace, connection, and awe with this greater, world that we're in, joy, an opportunity to build relationships, as well as environmental stewardship, which I really love to help support with the kids and talk about why the creatures around us are important, and why we need to be gentle with nature and make sure that we're letting the bees fly away and not going after them, being kind to the world around us. And this is a picture of some kids at a Timbernook program. So Timbernook, as I mentioned earlier, is a nature play experience that's for all kids, not just kids who have therapy needs. And so it's a program that individuals can become trained in. You don't have to be an OT to become trained in it. There are special educators and teachers and all kinds of different professionals, but it was developed by an OT out in New Hampshire, and then has become a program that is spread really around the world. There's some sites even in Australia and in England, and it's based in a lot of OT principles and child development, but it has a strong focus on free play for children, that unstructured play with adults there to step in if needed. And the Timbernook curriculum really just invites kids into some really cool experiences, everything from like garden themes to storybook themes like the Little Red Riding Hood and the Three Little Pigs and things like that. So there is a location in Columbus that's in Delaware, that's run by a special education teacher. And so I was trained in the Timbernook approach and then ran some programs at her site for a few years. And then after doing that, started doing my own camps, which have some Timbernook elements to them because I have that training background, but they're not Timbernook programs. They are nature enrichment camps. So this summer I'll be running one that has a self-regulation theme, one that is a garden adventures camp. So we do a lot of tactile play as well as some feeding activities for kids who tend to be more sensory defensive, maybe picky eaters, or have challenges with different textures and involving their senses in that way. And then I also have one that's a fine motor and handwriting camp. So childhood play in nature forms a foundation for lifelong care for nature and adult recreation in green spaces. That's from a study done in 2015. The reference is there for you, but basically they followed children who had had more exposure to nature in childhood versus those that had not, and found that there was a correlation between that adult participation in the natural environment. So nature as a co-facilitator for occupational therapy. I've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but nature-based OT is supported by a growing body of research that nature supports many client factors and performance skills that are outlined in our practice framework. So that includes those sensory motor skills, like I mentioned before, as well as social emotional development, engaging in play, all kinds of wonderful things that come out of being able to be outdoors. Another kind of point here that gardening has long been used as a therapeutic activity in the OT world, probably also in nursing and holistic nursing. There might be a connection with that. And research indicates that older adults who spent more time gardening after the COVID-19 pandemic reported physical, mental, and emotional health improvements, as well as improved sleep. So a neat study, more recent study there. I'm going to pause there for just a moment and see if anyone has any questions thus far. I know that was a lot of information so far before I jump into some ways to inspire nature connection.
One question I did have was,
Yeah.
what are the typical ages, and do you work with teens?
That's a great question. So right now, my practice, I primarily still see kids between the ages of 3 and my oldest is 14. Um, my camps go up through age 12. And I would say the bulk of my clients are really more in the 3 to 10 age range. I do get that question a lot though, because there is a huge need for middle school and high school, programs, especially groups for kids. And or I should say for young adults or teens. Something that I have considered at this point logistically is not something that I have undertaken, but as my practice grows, I could definitely see that might be something that I would be adding down the road. So at this point, most of my groups are children that are in kind of the late preschool, early elementary age range. And then, like I said, the individual clients vary from 3 up to 14 right now.
Okay, thank you
Any
so
other
much.
questions? And I have connected with a lot of nature-based OTs around the country, and there are some who really kind of prefer and their skill set is more suited to those older ages and do run some teen groups. So one of my friends who lives in Rochester, Minnesota, most of her practice is actually with older children. So, I think it's partly to do with just our own personal preferences and gifts and abilities in terms of where we feel we fit naturally, and what our strengths are. But one neat thing about doing this work is that I have connected with a lot of other OTs around the country, and that Contigo training that you mentioned earlier, is a group training that I did with other OTs. There was one other OT in the Columbus area who was doing a little bit of nature-based work, but she actually took a full-time position with Nationwide Children's and is not doing that at the moment. But there are some nature-based OTs in the Cleveland area as well as in the Cincinnati area. So to my knowledge, I'm the only one who, at least as a full-time practice, is doing this work in the Columbus area. All right, so I'll go on to ways to inspire nature connection. This says for clients, this could also be for yourself or for anyone really. So one of the first things I like to highlight when I do these presentations is that you don't have to be physically outdoors to still get a lot of benefits from nature connection. There are many ways that we can connect to nature even indoors. So um, some of the things on this list obviously might seem very simple, like plants, natural lighting, fresh air, opening windows, bringing natural materials in. Some of these other ones listed here have been some favorites with schools that I've worked with in terms of using different tools indoors, like microscopes and magnifying glasses. Um, I have this bird identification guide that I just got. I don't know if you can see it with my blurring, but off of a site called Teachers Pay Teachers. And there are lots of, bird identification guides, everything from really complex ones that you can find at the library to very simple ones like this for children, or even, I would imagine too, if you have loved ones or clients that are older, having a way for them to engage with nature with a bird feeder outside a window, even if they aren't able to get outside, or a simple bird guide to look at might be really helpful. Acorn painting is another of my favorite activities. I don't happen to have an acorn top with me, but acorn tops have this little kind of stem off the top of them that are great for kids working on a fine pincer grasp with their fingertips. And so we'll do painting with those, or the round part of the acorn is great as if you've ever done marble painting before, as a tool that you can use to paint with in a box, kind of rolling it back and forth. One of my earlier pictures had a kid doing that. Um, I also do a lot of leaf rubbings. I mentioned the hole punching with leaves, or even making pictures out of leaves. Pine cones, I showed you that pine cone earlier that had the yarn wrapped around it. There's a picture here of a child painting a pine cone. And then nature journaling is great for all ages. So there is a resource later on in the presentation. There's a wonderful nature journaling guide that's totally free online and kind of walks you through the different steps of nature journaling. And that can be as simple, for an individual as picking up a leaf and gluing it onto a piece of paper and creating a nature journal that way to, very complex where people get into the shading and the colors of the nature item that they're observing and, documenting the weather and all of those things. But there's lots of neat activities you can do with nature journaling to connect to the outdoors, even inside. And then some other ideas here, again, primarily for children on this slide, but everything from sensory tables using those natural materials from outside instead of, something that's manufactured. I do a lot of paintbrush creating with pine needles. So I'll have the kids, collect pine needles and we'll actually do painting with this instead of a standard commercial paintbrush. Nature weaving is what's pictured there in that photo on a piece of cardboard where the child wrapped the yarn around it and then wove different items through it. Um, Nature crowns are just, natural materials that are glued onto a large, long piece of paper and then wrapped around to create a crown. There's also some great songs and stories for children that are linked on there, as well as a pre-writing curriculum for kids who are younger and are developing those early writing skills. I do a lot of breathing activities outdoors. So for those of you who have that yoga connection, you might appreciate this, where we take sticks and we might make a square out of the sticks. And you may have heard of box breathing before, and we'll do that with sticks on the ground and trace over them with our fingers. Or sometimes I do one called mountain breathing, where we just take two sticks and make, sort of the beginning of a capital A shape. And we breathe in as we trace up one and out as we trace down one. And I love those activities because they're things that families can easily do on their own when I'm not there, very accessible. We do a lot of animal walks as transitions between tasks and areas, and those can be done indoors as well. Obviously, I do a lot of yoga with children with my yoga background, and again, another great way to connect to nature because so many of the children's yoga poses have animal names or tree pose, all things that connect to the outdoors. And then there's a book linked there too that has some different activities for outside from the 1000 Hours Outside group. And then for outdoor spaces, again, I mentioned the loose parts play that we might use sticks, logs, stumps, rocks, and do all kinds of different imaginary play with that. And it's great. Kids come up with the most creative things with that. I have one child who wants to make stew every time she comes to therapy. And so she has particular things. Certain rocks are fish, certain rocks are other parts of the stew, and she mixes it all together in the creek. And oftentimes we'll use things like tongs to pick those items up, which works on, a similar skill to cutting for many kids. I also use a lot of golf tees and mallets that we can hammer into the dirt or hammer through cardboard to create different things. Container or raised bed gardening is great for all ages. And an easy way to connect to nature even in an apartment space, you could do some container gardening. Sunflower houses and bean pole tent gardens are pictured here. So those are fun things for school environments as well. One of the schools I worked at had created a sunflower garden and it was really cute. They would go out there and do some story time activities in it. So again, a neat way to bring that nature a little bit closer. And then other ideas for outdoor spaces. So this is a picture of what would be considered a mud kitchen. It's just pots and pans from Goodwill or, old things out of your own cupboard and creating a space where kids can be creative and use those natural materials to engage in all kinds of sensory play. There's actually an OT out in Boise, Idaho, who her whole practice is built around this mud kitchen concept. She has it in her backyard and she does groups out there and she sees individual kids there. But it's really cool what they come up with. She'll have pictures of just the other day, she had a kid who had created a cake pop with mud that was on top of a stick and then had crushed up chalk and sprinkled it over the top to look like, frosting or chocolate that had decorated it. Snow play, I already mentioned earlier. I do a lot of nature scavenger hunts with the kids. Those are really fun ways to work on building those attention skills, being able to transition between activities and tasks. Cardboard seek and find is another fun favorite, especially for young kids. This is a picture of grass that I drew on here, and it says green, and then there's this hollowed out space. So the kids take this and then hold it up to something that's green that they put in the frame. So for young kids who are working on color identification, that's a really fun thing to do too. So I have, red and orange and different ones that then we can go around and find those different colors in nature. A barefoot walk, another great one for any age, as long as it's, okay for their own foot health to be without shoes. But a great way to connect to the natural environment. There's this whole concept of earthing or grounding that some of you may have heard of before, that the positive ions from the earth interact with the negative ions from our body, which actually promotes health and healing. So a neat activity to do with all ages. And then outdoor snacks and meals. I would encourage all of you and anyone that you know to, those opportunities when we have that nice weather, even in Columbus, if it's few and far between, but to get outside and eat some of your meals outdoors. And I always encourage schools to do that with kids too, because of such limited time that they often have outside. So some special considerations for outdoor services. Safety and risk assessment is obviously really important. I do an inquiry call with families before I ever do an evaluation or meet them outside with their child, and just want to make sure that it's going to be the best fit, because not every child is outdoor OT, appropriate for. So one of those things that I'm assessing during that call is, are they going to be safe in an outdoor environment where it's not fenced in, and we're in a wooded area? So for kids who have a little bit higher support needs and might have a tendency to run or walk away, obviously it's not the best fit for them. Other client factors that might be involved, the parks that I work in are not necessarily physically accessible. So I don't right now see children that are, for example, in a wheelchair, because they wouldn't be able to access the parts of the parks that I'm working in. However, I will say if you're in the Columbus area, there's a brand new inclusive playground that's over at Blended Woods Metro Park, which, if I ever had a client that had those kinds of needs, that would definitely be something that I would look into, because there's a huge need for opportunities for individuals with different motor challenges to be able to be outdoors as well. Most of my clients, I mentioned the ages, but most of my clients have ADHD, autism, some sensory processing challenges that may not be otherwise diagnosed at this point, learning disabilities. I do have some kids with some motor challenges, but they're not, to the degree that they can't access the environments that we're in. Another special consideration is making sure that you have a permit if you're going to be working with clients in public spaces. So any public park, and I have called around to lots of them in the area, but they almost all have their own system and their own rules about who can use those spaces, especially if you're using them for some sort of commercial purpose, if you're running a business and you're earning income from it. Weather conditions are another special consideration. So I did mention what I do with extreme weather. I probably know my weather app better than than one should because I'm constantly checking it to make sure that we're okay to be outdoors for, the next day. And so weather conditions are always something to consider. And I do have some clients where they can become really dysregulated if the weather is really hot or really cold. And so I need to, be aware of that and make adjustments if that's the case for certain clients. And then client privacy and confidentiality. Obviously, as healthcare professionals, that we take that very seriously. One thing that's different is in an outdoor public park setting, there's bound to be some people that are passing by or might even ask questions. And so a lot of times I just, generally mention, oh, we're just working on some activities here together if someone is inquiring. And then I let the parent, and I do encourage parents to participate in the sessions. I let the parent share more if they want to. And then therapist knowledge and physical ability. So I don't think that this is a setting for, a new graduate of any healthcare profession just because, you're not surrounded by other people to be mentored by. And you also have to consider your physical ability. So one of the parks that I have utilized is Blendon Woods. There's lots of pretty steep inclines and declines in the natural play area there. And I actually carry a lot of equipment with me too to be able to hang up a hammock or bring along supplies that I need. And so that's something to consider too, is that, obviously you could adjust for that and use a different park that maybe is more flat and not carry as much with you. But some considerations that have to be thought of ahead of time. And then here, I'm kind of shifting into some resources for you all, but if taking your work outdoors is something that you're interested in, there's one online community called Therapy in the Great Outdoors that was started by an OT who has a practice actually in the Bay Area and in Madison, Wisconsin. She has 2 locations now. But there's a variety of professionals that are on that site, including speech therapists, physical therapists, mental health professionals. And I know that she would welcome anyone from other professions as well. And then another site, this is more OT focused, the naturebasedtherapist.org, but it does have a great list of training resources that could apply to multiple professions. And I do think that getting additional training, which is something that I spent quite a bit of time doing before I started my practice, is really important because, it's not as easy to just open a cupboard door and pull out, a toy for a child as it was when I was in a clinic or in a school. You have to be very flexible, thinking on your feet a lot. And then here's some more resources from some of those pages talking about indoor and outdoor activities. And this INIWIRMO model is the nature journaling resource that I mentioned earlier. So that's shorthand for I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, which are the components of nature journaling. So that's fun to do even if you're not actually doing a physical journal. I do a lot of that with kids, like, oh, I noticed this, or I wonder where that came from. And in my practice, I'm not there to be a nature educator to provide, naturalist information for the children. My role is to help inspire that curiosity and awe and that play. There are wonderful people who are trained in that, naturalist kind of approaches, and a lot of our local parks are fantastic about the programs that they provide for more of that nature education piece. But I do love this nature journaling model, whether it's done spoken or as an actual written journal, just to bring that mindful awareness. For those of you who are yoga practitioners, you might appreciate that as well, that phrasing. And then some book recommendations. I mentioned some of those already, a few of the ones at the top there, but all of these are great books. If, personally you're interested in just learning a little bit more about the benefits of nature, The Nature Fix by Florence Williams is a fantastic book if you have not read that. And each chapter kind of highlights a different aspect of the health benefits of nature. And then here's a slide about staying connected with me. So I have an email list that I send, one email newsletter a month with some tips and resources, as well as information about things upcoming in my practice. And then feel free to share information about Forestways OT with colleagues, families, friends, especially if you're in the Columbus area. And I always appreciate referrals and people spreading the word about what I'm doing. And then there's the references. So I'll go ahead and stop screen sharing so that I can see all of you. Can you still hear me? Let's see. Yeah, okay, good.
Mhm.
All right. Any questions?
So this was really wonderful. How do people get referred to you? I mean, you get like, where do you get your clients from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, most of my clients have been word of mouth up to this point, although I have developed several relationships with some private schools and preschools in the area. I do preschool screenings at several different preschools each year. And so I've had some clients via that way. And then I have had some people who have just found me via, my website or Instagram or Facebook that way too. I'm also
Great.
part of some local business groups that support, children and families, and so those provide some referrals too.
And you do well childcare?
What was that?
You do well child if there's nothing wrong.
Yeah, so the enrichment camps that I run, those are for any child. So the just in the summertime, I've got 4 weeks of enrichment camps. Right now, I actually only have one spot left in two of the four. So they're almost completely full. But yeah, that's primarily what I do right now for children who don't have therapy needs.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Lindsay, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the benefits you're receiving from doing this.
Yeah, great question. So a little bit of a backstory. I had been a school-based OT, and I had also worked in clinics for most of my career up until the switch a few years ago, and was just finding that if you know anything about, well, nurses are the same way in schools too, but often we have teeny tiny spaces and no windows in rooms that were given for our offices or for working, individually with kids. And I lived, out of state for many years, had moved back to be closer to family and took, a job that was what I needed to do at the time for income and for making that move. But just found that my own mental health was really suffering about midway through that school year. And I know anyone who works in education or healthcare can relate to that in 2021, 2022, especially after following the pandemic. And so while it was a difficult time for me, it was that final push that I needed to be able to do something that had really been on my mind and heart for like 5 or 6 years. So for a while, I actually worked as a contractor for a clinic nearby a couple days a week as I built up my individual private practice. And just the difference, even in those, it was fun to see that difference in the clinic days versus my outdoor days. And there's a lot that I love about being in a clinic and all the wonderful equipment and the other therapists you're interacting with. But I would come home from those days absolutely drained after being under fluorescent lighting and around all these bright primary colors all day long and lots of stuff crammed in these little rooms. Whereas now I come home even from a long day and I might be physically tired because it's tiring to be outdoors all day with kids, but it's a different kind of tired. It's not the I'm completely wiped out and drained and just want to sit down. So I find that I have more energy and that my own just my love of my work has increased so much by being outdoors too.
Great. I wish you lots of success. I can see this really being a booming practice for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this has been very interesting, and it makes me now. I live in the country. We have 44 acres, and we neither one are able to get out and do much around it, but we can get out. So we will be getting out more. because I think that will be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then if you do happen to refer anybody to or share about my practice, sometimes people ask about funding and that kind of thing. I don't take insurance. For a whole host of reasons, but one of the ones related to nature-based is just that, insurance, as many of you probably know, dictates a lot of the way that you practice. And so especially in a nature-based setting, it can be really restrictive. There are nature-based OTs who do it, but at this point, I have not decided to take insurance. I am a John Peterson scholarship provider. So that's, for children who have an IEP but are attending a private school or are homeschooled. And then hopefully very soon we'll be approved for the autism scholarship. Similar group of kiddos, but a different pot of funds in Ohio. So hopefully that will allow some more families to access my practice because I do really feel like that's important. It's just that, with being a solo practitioner at this point, going the insurance route has not been feasible. So.
Yes, this was wonderful. And I just, admire the work you're doing and how you saw this through. And I think it would be fun. And I know this isn't your niche, but like even those camps for adults.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, at some point, I would love to do more adults, and have somebody doing, seeing some of the kids. Because as a yoga teacher, that's actually my passion is working with adults. And I just got trained in forest bathing as well. And so I'm offering that now to parents. And I see a huge need for a lot of support for parents too, and ways to help them connect and reset in nature. And so that's something that I'm hoping to grow a little bit as well.
It'd be fun.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Jen. Like I'd love to participate in your enrichment camp. So that yeah, this is really wonderful. And my children, and I think I shared this with you, Lindsay, but my children attended Waldorf preschool kindergarten, which is very nature based, and they would go out all weathers. And so it's really fascinating for you to hear. I mean, for me to hear you explain about just kind of, um, you know, how kids are benefiting from like playing with sticks and things like that. When and I would tell people when my kids went, they're like, well, did they learn how to read? Well, like, no, they don't really focus on like reading and stuff until later. They hear a lot of stories and songs, and yeah, they're playing it outside, but to know that all of that really
Hmm.
benefits them, benefits their mind and their brains, and helps them
Hmm.
to advance. So
It
yeah.
sets them up far better for success in school when they have that foundation in those younger years, than if they have had a really, academic heavy, structured preschool environment. Because, you know, kids can catch up quickly with the reading and the math and that kind of thing if they've got that foundation of that social emotional skills, that self-regulation. That's the part that you can't teach a kid as well later on. It's really critical to get it in those early years. So I think that's wonderful.
I was going to ask, I'm Kathy, I'm the OT in the
Yeah,
group.
nice to meet you, Kathy.
Yeah, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the primitive reflex integration work that you do.
Yeah, so I've done a couple of different trainings. One is with Move, Play, Thrive, another one with the Moscatova method. To be honest, there's not a whole lot of robust research. It's very controversial, I feel like, in our field. So I often, if a family comes to me and they have concerns about that, I will check those reflexes. I'll provide them with some activities to support that, but I try and keep it very functional. I might recommend some reflex integration activities, but I always try and tie it back to occupation too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there still needs to be more research on. And I think unfortunately people have kind of taken it as like this is going to be a cure-all for everything. And I don't, see it that way. Um, in a lot of my groups that, there are a lot of activities like yoga provides a lot of movements that are similar to reflex integration things. And so in group settings, I don't specifically work on, primitive reflex integration. We might do it through other, functional activities.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I want to add something because I'm a somatic therapist and educator, and reflexes are in play with every step.
Mhm.
So when you get somebody on uneven ground, a child or an adult, their reflexes get to respond. And so having them outside in this environment was where you were talking about a bird could fly by and that could stimulate things,
Mhm.
So that's just such
Mhm.
a great opportunity for them. So I don't think reflexes have to be stimulated. I think movement needs to be
Mhm.
stimulated.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, lots of functional movement patterns. Yes.
It's
Mhm.
great. I love looking at myself in here and seeing that window and the trees in the background. It's right behind me. It's so great.
Um, are there any other questions or comments from anybody else? Right. Well, this has been really wonderful. I mean, I feel like I've learned so much new and also kind of what you shared kind of affirms some of my own personal beliefs. And so it's really been great. And I think as holistic practitioners, we can really use what you shared in whatever we're doing. And I really, in my Ayurvedic practice, one of the things that I recommend to my clients, like when they work in the office, like get a little plant, you know, even if you're sitting in a cubicle, have a plant because that will just, um, just make things so much better and just, yeah, like you said, kind of bring a sense of calm and peace. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So thank you so much. It's Kathy says, thanks. I'm getting your newsletter now. Okay, wonderful. That's great, Kathy. So yeah, um, will those references and resources that you shared, will you provide that for people to, do you want to send it to me and I can distribute it, or how can we get those?
Sure. Yeah. I will share. I can share like a PDF version of it with you if you'd like, and then that way you can send it out to the people who registered.
Okay, okay, that sounds great. Yeah,
I want to
thank
thank you. It was really excellent.
Oh, thank you.
yes, yes, thank you so much.
Thank
I
And
you.
appreciate you
please,
all being here tonight.
please let us know when you offer something for adults.
Yeah,
Yes,
really.
yeah, mud pies
Yeah.
for adults.
Yep, will do. This forest bathing I've offered for my current, client parents. But if it doesn't fill, I will let you know, and yeah, would then have some additional options. So yeah, and being on
Great.
the newsletter, obviously, that's the best way to know about what's coming up. So.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So we can just go to your website and subscribe
Mhm.
for your newsletter. Okay.
Yep, yeah, it's actually
Fantastic.
a pop-up on my website. So if you go to my website, it'll pop right up and you can subscribe that way. So, yep,
Okay. Fantastic.
forestwaysot.com.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Great.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
night.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody, for
much.
being here. Have a good evening.